Okay, so I recorded this little lecture here. It sounds probably a little bit weird, but I think sometimes the stuff I'm going to try to talk about gets a little complex. And not complex in the way of, say, high math or engineering principles or anything like that, but this could challenge a little bit of what is standardly taught, or certainly what other physicians are saying, certainly what the media is saying. And so I figured if I just kind of recorded this, it allows you to sit down, process it, think about it at your own pace. Okay, so some of this could be a little bit challenging here, and I figured this would probably be the easiest way to start off. Okay, so understanding pain is the topic. Now, what is pain? All right, if you actually look at the definition of pain, this is from the International Association for the Study of Pain in 1994. The definition is it's an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage or described in terms of such damage. Okay, and this is just basically medical gibberish to really be condensed down into that pain is a unpleasant, all right, so it has to be unpleasant, sensory and emotional experience. Okay, so let's just keep this in the back of our mind. It's an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience. Now, what pain isn't? Right? This is really key. Pain is not nociception. And nociception is basically a stimulus, meaning if I poke you with a needle in your finger, there's a stimulus that's generated. That stimulus is received by nociceptive receptors in your body that sends a signal through your nerves that's delivered to your brain. Okay, that's what nociception is. It's simply a stimulus and a signal that's delivered to your brain. All right? And it's objective, meaning you may not even notice that little stimulus. But if we put wires in your body and measure the electrical activity throughout your body, we will see this. Okay, this is an objective thing that we have. Now, contrast this with pain, though. Now, pain is a process. Okay, it is not a stimulus. It's an experience, remember, from definition. It's taking that signal and then assigning a meaning to it. So you have to have two components to it. And it is produced entirely within your brain itself. And it is also subjective. Okay, this does not mean it's any less real. It just means that everybody's pain is completely different. What you feel versus what I feel versus somebody else's feel. Pain is a subjective experience. Okay, well, this also means that we can't really measure it well. Now, there's a lot of hype right now about neuroimaging and being able to see pain. And if you really start breaking down the studies, that's not what they're showing. They're showing different areas in the brain that are processing painful either signals, nociceptive signals, or the processing of that signal itself and assigning meaning to it. But they're not actually seeing pain. Okay, so emotional theory, we're going to touch on this really briefly here. Traditional and progressive. So if you look at the traditional emotional theory, this is about 50 to 100 years ago, and there was this belief that somehow emotions are less mature than reason, and that negative emotions, feeling bad, sad, whatever, are really bad, and that you need to control those through rational thought, meaning you think your way through things, you use you use reason all the time, you squash them down. All right. Now, progressive emotional theory, this is a little bit newer, 20, 30 years, is that the emotions are critically important. We've been neglecting them for too long because what they do is they allow us and they facilitate our behavior, they change our levels of awareness, they allow us to focus on certain things, ignore other things, and they guide and motivate us. And emotions have been neglected, and we're finding really is that emotions really are the strongest motivator for behavior. Of course, marketers and salesmen have known this for generations, and science is only starting to catch up with us. Okay, now Star Trek incidentally figured this out. If you look at the 1960s, who did you want on that starship with you? You wanted a Vulcan, Vulcans being an alien race that had squashed their emotions and were completely trained to think only with reason and rational thought. But by the time the next generation came around in 1980, the producers had recognized that when you're meeting an alien species, you don't want to be thinking or using rational thought. What you want to be able to do is understand their feelings. Because if you can understand the feelings of something, then you can have a better, more productive relationship with them. Okay, so progressive theory is really coming to the forefront here. Now, the other part with emotions that we have to think about is this iceberg topic. And if you see the top of the iceberg, and everybody knows about this, 10% of an iceberg is above the water, and that's what your emotional state is. That's how you are feeling now. Your state right now. Now, you'll see underneath it, though, the 90% of the iceberg that's covered in water that you can't see. We really don't understand if you're just seeing the top of an iceberg, how big it is, all the nooks and crannies down there. That is really what we would refer to as emotional process. An emotional process is all that background information in your brain, the subconscious motivators that comes from past experience, future thoughts, goals, motivation, context of injury and things, and that influences where you are right now. And as I said, since that's all kind of underwater, all that stuff is happening in the background. It becomes very difficult to tease that out, but it is critically important to understand where you're feeling, what you're feeling now, because of that background noise. All right. Neurobiology of pain, we're not going to get again into this too much here, and this is going to be simplified. So if you really wanted to go out and be aggressive and start pulling up all the behaviors and start doing through neuroanatomy, okay, there's going to be a whole lot more that we're not touching on. This is just to simplify things and make it much more easy to understand. All right, so the 3 dimension of pain, this was described by Melzack and Casey in 1968. This, I will also say, is changing. So Ron Melzack is changing his paradigm on pain that's been emerging over the last 10 to 15 years. So if you really getting into the cutting edge pain research, this is not exactly, it's moving much more into this emotional realm, I'll say, but this is a good context and framework to start with. All right, so the 3 dimension of pain says there's a sensory discriminative branch, that there is an affective motivational part to it, and there is a cognitive evaluative branch. Okay. Now, sensory discriminative is really the signal. That's nociceptive signal being generated. Affective motivational is that contextual information for it. And then the cognitive evaluation is taking those two together. It's really the higher levels in the brain, taking that signal, taking that value, and producing a behavior in response to it. Now, interestingly, we're kind of wired for this. So if you look into our body, we do have a lateral pain system and a medial pain system, and this has to refer where these nerve tissues are transmitted and traveling throughout your body. Now, these overlap a little bit, but overall, the lateral pain system contains a sensory discriminative branch, and this provides location, timing, physical characteristics. It really provides that nociceptive signal, that unpleasant signal, and it prompts that withdrawal response. So if you touch a hot stove, this is going to say, wow, my fingertip is burning, I'm going to pull back. Okay. Now, the medial pain system is the affective motivational component. It provides the emotional coloration and meaning to the signal, and this engages defensive behavior. So while when you first touch that red hot burning stove and you pull back your finger, okay, the medial pain system is going to say, wow, when I see this red glowing object, I shouldn't touch it because it's going to burn me. So it assigns and it puts this meaning along that signal. Now, if we take this analogy a little bit further, and we can pull it into a soundboard here, and we think of this sensory discriminative branch, this nociceptive signal, that's really the microphone. It's the input into the system. And then the affective motivational component, the part that assigns meaning to that signal, is really that mixing board. The mixing board there, you see all the dials and knobs, and it has other inputs that we can't even see. You can modulate that signal that's coming out and produce something very different from the initial signal that comes out into the cognitive value branch, which is your headphones or speakers. So signal comes in through your fingertip, through that nerve signal, goes into that medial pain system where it's assigned all this value and saying, what is this signal? What does it mean? How should I act? How should I think about it? What is this past behavior influence this? What are my future behaviors going to be because of the signal? And then it comes into the higher levels of the brain, and we understand and we drive our behavior from it. All right, so really the emotions are the mixer when it comes to the pain experience. So what is pain? Okay, it's an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience. Okay, nociception only provides the signal, meaning that stimulus from the periphery is only a signal. All right, and the reason I'm emphasizing this is too often when we're talking about pain, we are intermixing pain and nociception as if they're the same thing, and they are not. Nociception is only a signal. Now, the emotions change our awareness and they guide our behavior, so they have to have that nociceptive signal, and then that emotional context, state, and process really guides where we are. And of the two, emotional state, how we're feeling is going to change how pain is felt, and what has brought us to the state that we're in is going to have tremendous influence on how we have this pain experience. Now, what does this all mean? All right, hopefully this is providing a little bit of a framework here, but sometimes we're talking about this stuff, it starts coming out as gobbledygook. Well, what it really means is when we think about pain experience. Anytime you hear pain, you should add experience, unsaid to it. Okay, pain is not a thing. Pain is an experience. But the pain experience and emotion are tightly interwoven and influence each other. So much so that really how we change how you're feeling, if you're feeling happy, mad, sad, or glad, that will change what that unpleasant sensation is. Okay, and so we can prime or amplify that experience of pain by changing emotional state. All right. All right, so we have this complex interwoven web between what the pain experience is, the signal, and this our emotional state and process here. And this is also influenced by past experience and trauma. So remember, when we have that affective motivational branch, that emotional coloration has to do with the nature of the injury. So if someone has an incidental injury where they kind of stub their toe, I use this analogy with patients sometimes, is if you stub your toe, and you're stubbing your toe, though, because you're going up some steps and you're picking up your $10 million lottery check, you are going to feel that as a painful stimulus, or that nociceptive signal is pain, very, very briefly, because the context of the injury is very different. Now, again, if you stub your toe, though, and it's because you're going up the steps to your boss's office and you've had a bad day, there's layoffs going on, you hate your boss, you've been screaming at your wife, there's all this other emotional influence going on, that trauma is going to feel significantly different. Now, this may seem very minor, all right? Obviously, when we're talking about injuries, stubbing a toe is nothing. But if we think of things that are highly traumatic, painful injuries that change lives, the nature of that injury is going to influence how we feel from there on, all right? Coupled with this is uncertainty and fear, and I have a lot of data on this, that when we get in a situation where it's either uncertainty for your future, or you're not understanding what's going on, or there is a high fear response, anxiety component to it. Anxiety is just amplifies pain experience like you wouldn't believe. But if we add this to it, what's going to happen? How am I going to live? What's going to be next? We prime and influence and amplify that pain experience. And then our beliefs themselves will change how that context and that how we experience pain, either adaptive or maladaptive. I also have a lot of data on this as well when it comes through this concept of catastrophizing. This isn't you, but I had a lot of patients like this where something would occur, and instead of viewing it in the context of the situation, they amplified it. Literally, you stub their toe. I use the stub toe analogy. I know it's not the best one, but they would stub their toe and it would hurt, and then they would focus on the hurt, and they would say, "Oh my gosh, my toe! I hurt my toe. I broke the toe. Oh my God, I'm going to get gangrene. My toe is going to rot, and it's going to get necrotizing fasciitis, and it's going to have a horrible bacterial infection. I'm going to lose my entire leg from stubbing your toe." Okay, that's catastrophizing. It's really you seeing the worst case scenario here. I could probably do a whole nother lecture on this. Is viewing what has occurred and what the future is going to be. Okay, and a lot of this is real similar to a lot of stuff's in sales, a lot of stuff in goal setting, a lot of stuff's in motivation. Is one thing is when something has occurred, do you view it as a roadblock, an obstacle, something completely unsurmountable, or whether you're viewing it as this has occurred, what is my next step going to be that I'm going to do for myself? Okay. This is one of the reasons I'm doing this in a lecture format too as well, is because as I said, this can be very difficult, very challenging. I'm not in any way trying to minimize things, but this is key for pain. Okay. And when we look at this then, pain is not either physical or emotional. Okay, this just drives me insane when people are reporting this. Oh, you're saying my pain is psychological, or I have back pain and it's obviously is from degenerative disc disease, or whatever the case may be. No, pain is not either or. Okay, pain is instead an amalgamation between life stress, what is occurring now, your actual biology, meaning how your body is wired, how you are thinking, how you're behaving, and then an emotional context surrounding it. It's that intersection of all of them. That's what pain is. And so really what we're talking about most of the time is people are using nociception for pain, and nociception is not pain. Now, as I said, Nociception requires emotion to become pain, but it's only the signal. And also important with this, though, is to recognize that pain does not represent failure or weakness. Because you're experiencing pain does not mean that you're weak in any way. Okay, but it does become important to realize that that experience of pain is tightly wrapped and influenced by emotions, how you're feeling, how you're acting, how you're viewing things in the future. Really, really important. And this is not going to be talked about by most medical professionals. Okay, because it starts getting into some really deep issues. It starts getting into what are we going to do next. And in a standard pain practice, and what we standardly do for pain, is we're going to try to medicate you to oblivion. Okay, medications work on that nociceptive signal. But the longer the pain has been there, more pain is in the central component, meaning it becomes much more lodged in the brain. In the medications that we have to alter how your brain is processing things are not specific to pain. You're going to feel sedate, groggy, ill, cloudy thoughts. Okay, they don't work real well, and the data is extraordinarily poor. All right. Now, this also doesn't fit in because you can't walk into an office and explain this within 2 minutes. It's much easier to prescribe a pill and up the dose and down the dose. But our outcomes with chronic pain, okay, chronic pain is really anything that's been present for greater than 3 months, aren't very good in a traditional medical setting. All right. And the, you know, again, we could talk about this for a long time, but this was very hard for me to realize because I was the one treating patients. And when I went back and I said, well, why are my outcomes so poor? How come people aren't getting better? How come that they are, you know, pain one day is better, but the pain the next day is not? Overall, if you track them for 3 to 4 to 5 months, the things that I was doing wasn't doing much for them. It was very frustrating. More frustrating than I think most people can realize, and really changed my life, because when you spend 13 years of your life in education, then you realize, you know what, you really don't know as much as you think. There's all this research out there that is not being published, or it is being published, but it's not being acted upon by the medical community. So I will just end there with that. All right, so again, I'm putting this out as a lecture format so that you can go through it, so that you can process it. If you have questions on this, please let me know. I don't want this to be insulting in any way. I'm not trying to minimize things. What I would like to do is use this as a stepping stone so you can move forward in this. Okay, and I'm definitely willing and will do anything I can to help you out. Okay, all right. Looking forward to talking to you.